this might sound a bit cliche, but it's always good to put things in a very clear perspective of what you're capable of. And that doesn't mean like how talented you are. That doesn't mean, thinking like, oh, I should have done this, and I just was too lazy. No, I mean like, what's your support system? Like, do you have family behind you? Do you have family behind you with money and you don't need to worry about them too much? Do you have aging family? Do you have siblings beneath you that you need to worry about? Can this be prioritized? If it can be prioritized, is it sustainable? And I think if you get to a point where you realize like, man, maybe I could have persevered more, but if I want to achieve this thing and maybe it didn't work out, have perspective of perhaps why it didn't. And that doesn't mean make excuses, but I think it means make your peace with it and move on to something else, because I feel that making peace bit doesn't happen for a lot of people, myself included. And I think it can take a long time, and maybe by the time you do make peace, it could be too late and you don't go on to that next thing, which maybe is even more beneficial to you and something that you even prefer more, but you don't see that in the moment because you're just thinking, this happened and I couldn't achieve it, I suck, I'm shit, and you sink into that hole. Maybe not as direct as that, but
I know
in
exactly
a sense.
what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So definitely, like, just put things in a realistic perspective, and I think talk to yourself how you would speak to someone else. Like, I told you about a bad situation earlier, and it was like, I could have been super hard on myself and tell myself I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. But, you say to me kindly like, don't worry, next time it'll be different, this is fine, whatever. But when we talk to ourselves,
so different, right?
So different, man, so different. And I'm trying to learn that, and I think that's my advice. It's like, put things in a fair perspective and give yourself graces that you would afford to others, that you just don't to yourself for some reason.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Oh.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Jeoffrey Sarpong podcast. Let's go. Today I have with me Mikey. Mikey, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Let me just keep fit intros. I'm very well, thank you. I'm really excited to be doing this again.
It's good to have you back again after 9 months. I was checking the other day. It's been 9 months.
That's a pregnancy.
It's the whole thing.
Life would have entered the world. That's crazy.
That's crazy, bro. But no, I'm actually really happy to be doing this. We speak a lot. We speak every day, but it's good to get it on camera for you guys to also see, because I feel like our conversations literally, like, honestly, they're the best. Like, we deserve to be framed up in the loop. So I'm happy to be here too. But yeah, just quickly before we start, how have you been in the 9 months? Just quick update for me.
Yeah. No, I've been good. I've been, honestly, my current existence at the moment, and I know we kind of spoke about this recently, not recently, 9 months ago. So I don't just want our topics to be anime, but literally that's all my existence has been recently. All my off time is just waiting for anime games or waiting for anime episodes or reading manga. And I feel like I have to do my due diligence right now and tell people that you put me on Kingdom.
Yes.
And I've just been bombarding through chapters, man, and absolutely loving it. And then with Courtney, who was on here, my partner, we are churning through One Piece as well, so if I'm not watching One Piece with her, I'm reading Kingdom. We just reached Punk Hazard, and I don't want to get into it right now, maybe we will, but it's just mad to me how One Piece is the villains are so diabolical, man. Like, I'm at the bit in Punk Hazard, spoilers, I don't know, where we're just finding out that they've abducted children to turn them into giants, which I remembered, but I didn't remember that to keep them there, he gives them candies. Do you remember this thing?
Yes.
Which has drugs in them, and he makes addicts out of them so they can't leave. Like, it's
amazing. It's phenomenal. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, you're right. We'll get into it. But before you do that, actually, you're right. I did introduce you to Kingdom. Kingdom has been one of my guilty pleasures. Fucking, like, secret, amazing. I mean, not a guilty pleasure, maybe. Guilty sounds like I did something wrong.
yeah, bro, come on.
But my chest, but it's because no one knows about it, no one's heard about it. It's so weird because like, how could something that good just not be so popular in the West? But I'm so glad I introduced you to it. But I actually want to know what's your initial impressions of it. What do you first of describe the story a little bit, as you know, for people at home. But also, yeah, what's your initial impressions of it?
Yeah, so honestly, it's not like it was something I wouldn't have read, and I'm going to say a different anime, and I'm not comparing them, but I suppose maybe a bit more similar in themes. But I loved Vinland Saga, and again, they're nothing alike other than just it's man fighting each other with swords at a certain point, like just wars or battles on a battlefield, let's say. So it's not like I had an issue with it. I just genuinely never heard of it. And of course, like the simulation, bro, as soon as you said Kingdom to me, I start seeing tweets about it. I start seeing Shin being compared with like other main characters. Like, bro, what's going on? You know? Anyway, I can't remember what's called. Mandingo effect. No, not Mandingo. Where's it? Mandela. Not Mandingo. Not Mandingo.
Mandingo effect. I'm gonna start using it.
No, don't use that, bro. Don't use Mandingo effect. I'm begging you. But so honestly, I like when you told me about it, I wasn't like hesitant or anything. I was like, oh, he loves this thing, looks cool, whatever. And honestly, it's everything I want from. I know it's like a seinen kind of, but it's so shonen in how it operates and the characters it has and the motivations and actions. But what I love about it is that it just wastes no time. And where like One Piece has one time skip, I just feel like after every single arc, there's just a time skip, and it's just constantly like following the details. I can't remember what the book is now, but like the history of the warring states, and it's just like talking about the different chapters and the different years of rule under this king.
How does it start? Do you know? So the story for Kingdom. For people at home, what's the story of Kingdom like?
So very quick, it's these two children who fight each other every day, and it opens with them having their 1000th sparring session. Very young kids with seemingly prominent fighting styles, and they have a dream to become the greatest generals under the heaven. And again, like so shonen, you know, so shonen, especially considering when it would have started, like around One Piece and Naruto, and you know, just those dreams. And then, without revealing too much, it's a lot of issues happen right from the get go, and and they're peasants. Sorry, I should have said that. They're literally peasant children, and it's explained you can't really become. It's hard to join the military, let alone become a general, if you don't have some sort of noble background or at least like kind of middle class, let's say. And so it's just following his journey in pure tenacity. And again, like a simple kind of idiot type thing, an innocent idiot, like just charging straight ahead at every problem and seeing how people react to him. And man, I just love it because I just think it hits. I remember someone said to me the artwork isn't good, but I think what the art does so well is just build these scenes of such aura. And yeah, maybe a hand will look a bit small in one picture, the proportions or the anatomy of an arm might be too long, I don't know. But it just captures so much emotion so perfectly. And yeah, you really feel invested in his journey to become the greatest general and stuff.
Dude, literally, like, I
absolutely
love
love it.
Like, honestly, like, seeing you go through it too has got me so, like, excited, because you'll send me, like, chapters, like, pictures, and I'm just remembering when I had those moments of reading the manga again and almost seeing, like you were saying, like, the scenes. I think one of the best things about Kingdom, not apart from the story and the characters and, like, the fact that it's war and it's strategy and it's, like, in-depth strategy, which I think it mimics, like, actual strategy, because you can see every single general has different tactics, and the tactics actually matter. You know, it's not just like I'm just stronger than you. It's actually like I'm going to use my pawns and my knights and all these things against you.
It really well,
and it makes it even clearer. Even though it's manga, it's like it's still clear for you to follow through. But like, one of the best things it has is those moments, those like incredible moments of just like sheer, just like you said, hype and aura. It's just like when like I can't even because I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to. But like there's a scene that involves a guy, even like the characters passing on something to another character, and it's just like those kind of scenes just fill me with so much joy.
I think something that I really love about it, before I lose my trail of thought, is that we speak about the wars and the planning and stuff, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's like the greatest strategy thing I've ever seen, but comparing it to something like One Piece, where there are a lot of grand scale events that always happen, and Oda needs to keep track of maybe like 4 or 5 different parties at a time, usually. And I feel Kingdom does that every single arc. Like, every arc is just that, and it's constantly showing you, this is where the army is. And one army could have 5 different factions. The other army has the same, and they're fighting each other, and the pair-ups are so carefully calculated to always compare and contrast their qualities, you know, and that makes for great reading, because then the situation that Shin and his unit always find themselves in is always, sometimes they're up to the task, but it's always a challenge for them, and it's well thought out, in my opinion at least. And man, absolutely enjoy it for that reason. I'm loving it.
Honestly, I can't wait for you to keep going, and I can't wait to finish that. But okay, I'm gonna go off that. So, but yeah, that was a good start, and like I think like one of the also things that we've been talking about, and I think one of the things that you've introduced me to that I want to get more into is more Disney anime films. Because so from the beginning, since we first met, you've always been like the biggest advocate of like the best, the classic Disney films. And I've never, it's weird, I grew up on just the basic ones, you know, Lion King and like, I don't know, like Tango, or like, you know.
To be fair, Lion King, like, I'm not going to say too much. Lion King is also part of those classics.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll talk about it a bit later, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, but no, those classics, and just like there's different ones that you've introduced me to, and like, you know, like Treasure Planet. And like, I've never seen Treasure Planet. We still haven't seen Treasure Planet. It's been 9 months of us talking about seeing. But no, and I've always been fascinated to that. So talk to me more about that. What was your introduction into Disney films? Why do you like it so much? What do you think about it that everyone really likes about it?
Yeah, like, so like, just the first thing I want to say, when we say Disney classics, there's probably not disingenuous, but it's a bit complicated, and I think getting older and calling those the classic ones makes me feel a bit old, maybe. But like, you know, I'm not talking necessarily about the Snow Whites and Bambis and I can't think of other ones, like Sword in the Stone.
Well, the old ones.
Yeah, and
Not
those
new.
exactly,
Yeah.
and those have those. They have their own merits, and I love them as well. But I'm specifically talking about the kind of like era throughout the late 80s, early 90s of those 2D hand-drawn Disney classics, so to speak, which Lion King is a part of. And how I got into them, man. My dad just loved buying VHSs at the time. I think he like just got into a good job, and growing up he loved those kind of animations. But when VHSs started coming out and like home cinema, there's like wind chimes. I don't know what's that going. We're gonna get exercised. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's just.
I can't hear it. But no,
Oh yeah, sorry, I thought you were
like,
looking at it. There's like wind chimes somewhere. Excuse me, but no. So he started getting all these VHSs for just watching them at home, and he got a bit obsessed with it. He would always, I don't even remember when they started coming in. It's like one day we had none, next day we had all of them. And yeah, like, you know, obviously things like Lion King, but then Lilo and Stitch, of course, Hercules, Mulan,
all of these are like just
all the
one
time
after
on
the
loop.
other.
It was literally like, it would get to a point where at bedtime we would just be like, oh, what are we watching tonight before bed? And it was just constantly cycling through those.
That's amazing.
And yeah, like, I don't know what to start saying next. I don't know if you have another question.
No,
popped up.
that's. But I was just going to ask, because in my
Yeah.
mind I was like, what age did you start watching these, and like, did they really give you like any perspective? Like, what were you thinking when you're watching these movies?
Yeah, man. You know what? When I probably started around like 4 or 5, like watching them, maybe not understanding them so much, but 4 or 5. And maybe it's also the way my dad watched them with me, but I find myself being so emotional as I get older. Like, I'll watch something and things just, especially when it comes to animation and those emotions they're trying to convey, they hit me so hard. Like, I'm often tearing up at scenes, you know. I think, for example, one of my favorite ones is a Goofy movie, which probably isn't one that you think of as like a Disney classic, because, you know, obviously it's always like Lion King and stuff. But bro, it's a Disney classic. It's a musical, like The Lion King, like Mulan, like Lilo and Stitch. Well, not Lilo and Stitch, sorry,
Joker
but
too,
like Joker too.
That's alright.
But like, it's a musical. It's a beautiful story, and I don't know, it's like, as I get older, and I suppose my own relationship with my dad and stuff, because that's what Goofy movie's about. It's Goofy and his son, and his son's like starting to find his own feet, and there's a girl he wants to go with, but then his son, Goofy, is afraid he's losing his son and forces him on this summer holiday, taking him away from his babes. And yeah, I really recommend it, but I think they've made me, because they're so focused on emotions and considering like a person, I've just become like so hyper aware of others and their feelings. And I honestly do probably attribute that a lot to other things in my upbringing as well. But through watching those Disney films that were always concerned with a character struggling through a lot of classic hero journey stuff, like even Mulan, you know, like literally Mulan, it starts off with she's a woman who is on a path, like, you know, feudal China, I don't know. She's on a path to become a wife, forced to, like, that's the only prospect they have, to become a wife for a good family. But then all of a sudden, the Huns are attacking China, and they send out a call for soldiers, and her aging dad gets called in, and she's like, "Nah, I'm not letting you go. I'm going to step in for you, pretend to be a man, because a woman can't join the army." And it's just that journey, you know. And I think we spoke about, funnily enough, like with Pirates of the Caribbean, but they're just tales, you know. They're like almost myths in a way. And, you know, Lion King, of course, has that, what is it? I always forget. It's like Hamlet.
Yeah, wait. That's Hamlet, Shakespeare?
Shamlet. Shakespeare, though, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like literally the story of Hamlet. I could be getting that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's like a Shakespearean tale. And they all feel so Shakespearean in that sense.
I don't go off that. I think, yeah, like beautiful, really well put. And I think when you compare, you're right, Shakespeare and Disney, a thought popped up to me, because recently I've been thinking about this a lot, about how like stories like Disney, stories like Shakespeare's, they kind of like mimic, or they'll kind of like portray human life, human emotions, human like battles and struggles, and these like kind of like abstract sense. But when we watch them as kids, we're obviously intaking these and learning about these things. And I think like the goal and the role they play in our lives, the role they play in like shaping us as like people, and like shaping us as like you're talking about, having those emotions, having that kind of realizations, that family and that father and son like relationship, even before you can actually figure that out like consciously. That's such a powerful tool that I think Disney so like rarely like is able to put their hands on. So yeah, talk to me more about that. What do you think that is? What do you think the ability to like kind of like shape humans and shape how people kind of grow into kind of the people they become, or the, you know, kind of, I'm thinking more along the lines of like, you know, like how these kind of movies teach us how to be good, or this kind of movie like Mulan teaches a woman how to be someone like that, you know, like in that kind of world. Like, what do you think that is, or where do you think that comes from?
I mean, I think a lot of that is subjective, you know, because people will take from it what they want, and I suppose Mulan, I can take as much as I want from it, but maybe I wasn't the target demo specifically. But I think it does package, and even anime to a degree, like I think they do a great deal, if you're willing to look for it. They package some very important life decisions that we have to make sometimes in our lives, but they package it in a way that's fun and endearing, and they're an hour and a half, not usually longer than that, and you follow along with it, you don't get bored. And because they're quite short, they're so rewatchable. And again, because they're short, it's just always moving. Like, it's just always constantly going. And sometimes I rewatch one of these films and just be like, oh my God, we're here already. But there's another 40 minutes. Like, what more can they do? And I don't know, like I think we spoke about this with like Spirited Away and stuff. And I think when you say, how does Disney shape people? Similar to things like Spirited Away, I think it's very Western, the kind of ideologies they're trying to teach, I suppose. But even though they are drawing from inspiration from, like, you know, Greek mythology and Mulan.
They try to teach these ideologies, like they actually try to like instill some sort of narrative in our lives.
Yeah, but I think the only stories worth telling will do that, you know. Just because that is what a story is. I don't think every story needs to be a lesson, don't get me wrong. But I think a story is always about a thing happening and seeing someone resolve or not resolving something. You know, I'm sure someone can probably point to a film where that doesn't happen. But in my opinion, that's kind of an essence of a film. And even if it is a bombastic adventure, where maybe it's just focusing on action. Even still, like some of the decisions they might make, and I'm not going to try to start saying that action films are trying to tell important stories. It's not always that deep, but I think it's more than a conscious effort to teach the next generation lessons. It's just the best stories are just that, and you can't help but learn from them. I think before you move on to the next question, I wanted to slow down a bit and just sort of say, like, what is your experience of Disney films? Because before I start vomiting out like all the things I know, I kind of want to know, like, what have you seen? And I'd actually be super interested to know, like, in Ghana, like, what was Disney like for a Ghanaian boy, because I can't even imagine.
See, this is like, thank you for asking. That's such an amazing question. I think, like, for me, my experience of Disney, and I think that's why my question comes and is clouded in that kind of perspective, because it comes from me coming here at 6 years old. First off, there was no Disney in Ghana. Like, maybe it's the place where I'm from, but it's not that widespread. There's certain things you have to have. TVs and all these things, and it's just like that may be a luxury, but even for those luxury things, I don't think those upper class people had that. It was just more of like the stuff in Ghana that was spread around. But so coming here and then kind of learning about this culture, one of the things I learned was Disney films. So watching Lion King for the first time, watching all those like classic like Snow White and all these things, that kind of shaped my perspective on what I thought, at least, this is what the Western culture and the values that they believe in. And
did you resonate with the Western cultures at all?
Certainly, no, certainly. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. There was there's 2 points to that. Yes, at first I resonated with them because, like, for example, those Disney films, for example, Lion King. Watching that Lion King and that scene where Mufasa is talking to his ancestors, I felt like I could tell that's like an African theme that they got that from. And I think, like, maybe it was like them hinting at that spiritual world beyond the material.
What do you mean that's like an African theme? Like, why is it an African theme?
For us, I think, especially growing up in Africa, spirituality is a big thing. Like, the essence of that, you having a relationship with something that you cannot see, that is believed widespread there. And so, like, even now, it's so funny, when I went back home when I got a bit older, and because I'd grown up here, I kind of lost that. And I was talking to them, and they were talking about, we have this stool, and, like, the story behind the stool is that this stool was brought down from heaven, and then these people would, like, they'll pray to the stool because it has that relationship. And I was like, well, you don't actually believe that happened. That's like a metaphor, right? So, like, no, that actually happened. And that, so in the West, and especially in Africa, the mental, how they perceive the spiritual is more real to them. It's more material.
In West Africa.
In Africa, just in general. I mean, all I know is West Africa, and I think I definitely need to do more learning about the rest of Africa. But, like, definitely in West Africa, the perception is that these things, these spirits, your ancestors, they look up to you, they look after you, like, they're behind you. This kind of like long lineage. These are things that always happen, that always exist in the world, and you ignore them at your peril. And people will curse you based on the things you do, and, like, I never believed that. I was like, they're cursing me, I don't care.
Say, like, growing up in, like, northeast London, I obviously come across, like, I've grown up, white people have kind of been the minority for me. I've grown up with a lot of Pakistani people, a lot of African people, and I think a lot of African communities, like, when we're children, we joke and laugh about, like, juju and black magic, but, like, is that what you're kind of speaking to? Like,
absolutely. And, like, and it's like, obviously here we joke about it because we're kind of separated from it, but back there they really believe that and really see that. And so, like, for me, seeing these stories that kind of told these mythical kind of tales that interceded and integrated these kind of like spiritual animals and all these things, that was very, like, even though I didn't realize it consciously, that was very relatable to the things that I grew up from back home. So there was a relatability that wasn't recognized, but also I also felt like I was learning about the Western culture of, like, chivalry, like just like how these characters, like, chase ambition and success, and all these traits and all these stories were being kind of like implemented in me from early on. And so growing up, I always thought, okay, Disney is the Western pantheon of, like, this is values and this is how it kind of spreads across. Because it's so big also, and then, so it's very interesting now to speak to you and say, like, well, these stories were, like, good narrative stories, but I don't know if we look at them as, like, they're kind of the things that we will take our values from, which makes me ask another question. Is like, if not Disney, where did you derive your values and the things that you care about, and, like, your concept of good and evil, like all of that stuff there? Where did you derive it from?
Man, like, I think like Disney for sure, Disney films, and Pixar films as well, just simply through osmosis, because I couldn't get away from it, which is so interesting to me. That you in Africa, like, it's just not there. But I think video games as well, like the idea of, you know, at university, so I for context, I'm a big procrastinator. I'm a big procrastinator. And when I was at uni, we had to pick our dissertations, and I love video games, and I've always wanted to do research in that space. So for my dissertation, I thought, look, I would love to see if video games make you more of a procrastinator.
That's amazing.
Like, I thought so as well, but the issue was procrastination. I at the time, and I haven't really thought about it much recently, but my issue at the time was, how do you measure procrastination? So I kind of changed that to motivation. And then motivation, how do you measure that? And what I decided was, I'm going to measure motivation by how long someone perseveres in a given task. And so for my my tests, let's say, I would have two groups. One group plays a level on a game that's really hard, and then the other group plays a level that's quite easy, very easy. That was a whole different barrel of fish, because what's easy to me isn't easy to someone else, long story short. And through doing all my desk research, all I was finding, because I wanted something to kind of say, yeah, research shows that games make you less motivated. Bruv, all I was finding was, yeah, video games make you much more motivated. They make you much more, like, driven to persevere and want to overcome. Yeah, if you lose, you get angry, and you learn that, and you carry that into different aspects. So I think a lot I learned from games. I think my sense of humor was really shaped by not just Disney, but the video games I played, because when I was a kid, there was a big emphasis on mascots, like gaming mascots. You know, Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, and the money that just comes from having a mascot is so important. And so on PlayStation, you know, there were so many mascots at the time. There was like Jack and Daxter that I loved. There was Sly Raccoon. There's Ratchet and Clank, like just big mascots that they're snarky, they're cheeky, they've got to stick up, you know, up their bum and stuff, because I don't know, I said bum. We swear here. We swear here. But, you know, and then so they very American also, but I really did shape my sense of humor from games, and even, I suppose, that perseverance. And then yeah, I suppose Disney films and and you know what, even outside of gaming, but still related to gaming, like sharing games with other people or playing a game together and learning what that is. And some people it's better to play games with, and understanding why that is. And I probably didn't do that at the time, but as I get older, it's just lessons you learn over and over. People take the piss out of me because I'm so tight with things. Like, I don't like giving people money. I don't know who does, but I really don't like it. Even like sharing food and shit is a problem. But I think it generally all stems from, like, when I was a kid and a boy would be like, oh, let me borrow the game, please let me borrow the game, come on, please let me borrow it.
Don't get it back.
And then I don't get it back.
That's not fair.
Bruv, imagine one of my friends, I let him borrow my game, and then after a month I was like, bro, can I just get it back? Because I didn't even play it. I was like, bro, can I get it back? And went, oh, I'm so sorry, I swapped it with my other boy for another game, and I keep asking him to give it back, and he's literally just telling me, no, I'm not giving you your game back.
So when your game to
bruv, so I was just like, rah, so I literally just lost the game then, huh?
Yeah, that's crazy.
But no, so I think a lot gaming and yeah, Disney maybe.
I have a question on that. So you were speaking about gaming, and I got me a question. I don't know if this question is even one that you can answer on the spot, but like, what do you think? Because I mean, we're talking before about evolutionary traits and stuff that we develop, and gaming. Now trying to put kind of equivalency in my head. How I see it, is it gaming? Is it art? What do you think gaming represents? Is it like to people, to human beings? Because there's so many different variations of it. There's a sharing aspect of it. There's a playing aspect of it. There's a learning to overcome challenges. There's that, you know, kind of like that skill and that kind of technicality that you learn playing the games, which can be applied to life. yeah, what do you think gaming? What role does gaming and video games play in life?
That's really interesting because I think with a book or a film, you can always say there is a creative who has a story they want to tell.
Exactly, yeah.
And if it's literature, it's literally just a story through words that they convey the meanings through, they convey environments through, and so on. Film, through not just words, but directing your actors, collaborating with your director of photography, getting the right shots, getting the lighting right.
It's curated, it's crafted, yeah.
Editing that on another level, and you
yeah.
need people who are good at editing, who can not only listen to the director's vision, but also have their own flair and making that work to tell this cohesive story, But with games, at least in essence, for what a game is, it's really interesting because it's people that want to make a game that people like and play with. And it's not necessarily, I don't know what that is. You're right, I can't answer that. But I think it's so interesting that as an art form, which I do believe it is an art form, you're constantly just making... It's like games are simulations of life. Like even football, chess is simulations of life. So to constantly be manufacturing that and want to be driven to do that, it is really interesting. And I wouldn't know how to put words on that drive.
It's so interesting too, even like the perspective of the fact that like you could make a game but the relationship doesn't stop there. You're making a game knowing someone else is going to play it.
Yeah.
When you make an art, they're not part of that creative process. They're just consuming it. But as a gamer, if you can't understand exactly, you're the other end of it. If you can't understand the hints or the mechanics that this person has created and like be able to build off that, and you don't have that same level of like understanding. Like for example, you take Elden Ring, right? I've never played Elden Ring, but I've known from people who played Elden Ring, like the level of detail and the story and how hard the game is and all these different aspects of it adds to the enjoyment or the lack of enjoyment of the game.
But Elden Ring is really interesting because, so as a game, and the studio behind Elden Ring, they've almost defined a new genre of games called Souls-like, which is just, honestly, I wouldn't even really know how to, that's a discussion in itself to describe what a Souls-like is, I think. But like Elden Ring, I don't know if you know Demon Souls, but those kind of games, right? Like action, role-playing games that, yeah, anyway. I'm not going to try explain it here, but making a game for people to play. But the thing that these Souls-like games do is make it extremely hard, like extremely, extremely hard. And I always find it interesting that game design isn't just about making a happy experience. Not that other mediums are doing that, but perhaps the perception of video games could be that it's just playing and having fun. But there's been occasions where I'm playing a game and I'm getting frustrated and I don't want to stop. But people will say to me like, well, why are you playing it? And then that just pisses you off because like, you wouldn't understand why I'm giving it.
I have to do this. I have to.
Literally. And it's just so interesting that even something like that vision. Imagine we have that conversation like, who's your favorite writer? Like, I know I'm asking you this. Who's your favorite writer? Just a quick one.
Fuck.
Doesn't have to be most favorite. Just
okay,
a good writer.
Rumi. I like Rumi.
So like you could say Rumi wrote this thing because he wanted to tell this story. How weird is it to say like this guy created Elden Ring to just piss people off,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also one of the most rewarding experiences ever, and that's part of their vision as well. Like, it just has to be. And when I consider what it is as an art form and what it, I suppose, like conjures, let's say, what it inspires in the people that play it, it's so interesting. And I, as a medium of entertainment, like an art form as well, I genuinely just love it. And touching on what you said earlier, that when you have a game, or when you make a book, like it, obviously you can interpret it, and like a film, you can interpret it in a similar way, but you can't really transform it beyond the film. The film is the film. Meaning can be discussed, but typically there is a meaning. With a game, it's like, I make this game, I give it to you, and then it becomes your own experience, Even things like people are willing to watch people play a game because their own experience of a game, from how they play, how they react to things, it's so unique to an individual that people are willing to pay, willing to watch people play, willing to pay to watch them play. You know.
Tongue twister, but yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that. Speech ability. And I, you know, it's so interesting to me. I love video games, man. And just that kind of freedom it gives you. Well, you know what? I'd love to ask you this question, because this is something me and Umar often talk about. I've kind of spoken about video games as just games, but at the same time, there are games that are built from the ground up to be a narrative-driven experience. And there's a bit of a joke in the industry where if there is a game less focused on gameplay and more focused on narrative, you kind of tease the director and be like, oh, they just wanted to make films, but they weren't good enough, so they're making a game instead.
Yeah.
Obviously, very rude tongue-in-cheek thing to say, but sometimes they are a bit half-baked, or as a concept, it just doesn't make for a fun game. And that's what I wanted to ask you about. I know you don't have a big experience of games, but what do you think about the idea that for a game to be good, what should be prioritized? Gameplay or narrative?
It's a very good question. I think for me, I'm a bit biased in it, because obviously I love narratives, and I think there's so much that can be taken from narratives, and my lack of experience of gameplay, even the games I'm drawn to, is because of the narratives. You know, I talk about, Red Dead. I've not played Red Dead, but I can see that, just putting in that world, I feel like it would be so interesting. But I think, I've been thinking of it for both, right? So obviously for narrative, for me, it'll be about, because even though it's a narrative and you guys make fun of it, I think it's so much different from actually writing an actual narrative, an actual novel. Because I think what they're doing with the game is that they're allowing you to add to the narrative. They're allowing you to be because my mind just goes to, okay, you're basically having this character, or like a protagonist, who has a free will, and the protagonist is the gamer, and you're putting this person in this world, allowing them to make choices which affect, and obviously they know which different paths they can go, but you're allowing them to make choices which affect their enjoyment or the story, how the narrative will play out. And that to me just blows my mind. That to me is such a unique way to take something that's supposed to be, solid and, kind of like not supposed to be, because obviously narrative for me, when I read books, or when I was reading books as a kid, I was being inhabited into their world, but it was also still like, I wasn't literally in their world. I wasn't literally looking around, But with games, you've taken that imagination and brought it to form, and like that's that they're in that world now, and you get to make that. But then again, I don't know what the gameplay experience could be at its highest, at its top highest. What that enjoyment would feel like, having played all these other games and seeing like, actually, this is the best version of that. This is actually taken to the extreme form and made it really good.
You know what I'd say to you? Do you think FIFA has a narrative?
See, that's an interesting story, because FIFA's narrative is built upon the beautiful game. It's the greatest narrative ever, and it just keeps because literally, just think about that. Like the example we have of FIFA is such a great idea, because like the fact that we understand these people and these characters in real life is the only reason why we play that game. Because the gameplay is shit, we all know that, but it's shit enough, it's good enough that it'll make us play with these characters like pawn pieces on a board to see what would happen if we were the manager, we were controlling these players. But these players are real people in real life, living across the road somewhere. But because it has a embedded real life experience, that narrative is placed on top of this thing, and then it's kind of developed that way.
And so do you think then that's what makes a game like FIFA satisfying? It's not the mechanics of the game, it is your love for football and that kind of thing. Like if there was, it's very hard to ask the question I was about to say. I was going to say, if there was a game like FIFA but it wasn't about football,
Would I also...
yeah, but that's a stupid question. I think maybe a better question would be something like, if you weren't so into football, do you think you would still play a game like FIFA?
Probably not, to be fair, because I know people who aren't into football and like they'll play FIFA and be like, I don't get this. These are just characters running around, and I can see why they view it like that, But it's also, it calls back to what I said before about the game being an experience. FIFA is the most shared experience I've ever had, because it's not even about. Now, the narrative is important, but it's about me being my friend. It's about me facing my friend of his team, and he facing him. It's big. It brings form to that rivalry you have in real life, and actually makes you like, okay, go on then. Actually have these people play with your characters and have that. So it's like, there's different levels, and FIFA's such a unique example, because even the gameplay might not be good, or the narrative might not be as like, because the players don't even look like the real players, or like, it doesn't even matter how how like realistic it is. It doesn't have to be photorealism. It's just, can you give me the tools that I need? And like that to me is fascinating, you know. And I think like a question I had for you actually was about, we were mentioning it before about how because you were talking about the chess and the evolutionary traits that we have from these things and how children can learn, and I'll let you speak about that a bit more. But what do you think, taking gaming and taking these kind of things, what do you think are some of the evolutionary traits that we've learned we can take from that?
Well, I think it was Piaget that said play is little work, little sprinkle of what we learn at work. No, you know, I mean, it's been discussed in psychology for decades now, nearly centuries, of just how important play is in formulating people's personalities. And before I go too off track, what was your question, just like specifically?
So the evolutionary traits of gaming, but also like moving away from that to like just like
play
normal,
in general. No, I kind of had this realization, because I guess that's what you want me to say specifically. I had this realization recently that again, Umar, who's been getting into chess, told me this thing that there's this hilarious thing that happens when people play chess with their children, and it's that the kids get very good at chess very quickly, because chess is all about pattern recognition and how if you notice one, what pattern should you do to correct that course and win. And children are very good at that skill when they're younger, and especially learning your patterns, you know. And I was sort of speaking on that and realizing, well, maybe not realizing, but in my opinion, the way I thought of it was, that in itself is evolutionary, because let's bring it back to caveman days. If there's a family in a cave somewhere and their child needs to go out into the wild and learn how to survive, and learn how to do this thing to fight the saber-toothed tiger, or learn this different skill to make this tool to make it stronger and do this, or and that in itself is evolutionary. And I love that in modern society it's like those things that are baked into us at like a hardware level, you know, it doesn't go away. And so for a child, these things like chess that are so they're such games at their core that they're and a game is a simulation of life, you know. And so when you play chess, you're effectively just simulating life and death. If you lose, you die. If you win, you survive and you go on to the next one, and you're a better chess player for it, I suppose. And, you know, and as I was having that thought, I was like, man, so that's why children are so good at picking things up when they're kids, because they just need to learn to survive. And it's why when they are playing a game that again is a simulation of life and death, when they lose, it's why they get so angry, like
literally death for them.
And you've had young siblings, so I'm sure you've seen like breakdowns, like mental breakdowns. And like that's interesting, because I've not had younger siblings. How have you kind of tackled children, hopefully not actually tackling them, but how have you
run your in RKO?
Yeah, because I know you had to kind of be the male figure for your siblings as well. So like, when you kind of did you have siblings that were sore losers? And if you did, like, how did you tackle that?
Oh man, yes, all of them are terrible losers. Like, and I think also because I'm a terrible loser too, so I would win even when they were like little kids, teach you the real world. But no, so I'm the middle child, so I've got two younger siblings. I've got one younger brother and one younger sister too. And obviously in the African household, I wouldn't get into it, but like I had to look after them always. I'll just be there, just kind of looking after them. But yeah, very quickly we started playing video games and whatever. And I noticed even back then, they picked it up really quickly because I offered a challenge. Because I'd let them win when they were very young, but as they got older, I'd obviously try. And like, I remember this one game in particular. It was Batman Begins. It was like maybe it was Justice League, whatever. But it was like a one-on-one fighting game. We would play it all the time, and I would always win. And sometimes they would win also. Now if we play again, but it was like seeing that at that age, figure out the maneuvers of what I would be doing or how they would be doing, how they'll play against each other, and how they were sore losers, and how they'll be like, actually, I don't want to play you anymore. I want to play this other kid.
But that's what I want to know. Like, when you notice they're a sore loser, like, what did you do? And you said earlier, like, let me teach you what life is like. So I'm interested, especially with the African background as well. Like, if your sibling was a sore loser, did you talk to them about it? Did you just keep pushing until they break? You know, like, I'm interested.
No, I mean, it's like it's weird too, too, because I think you're very similar too, because I had this weird like recognition of myself at a young age. So even though I was like maybe like 5 years younger, older than them, maybe a bit more, I was still like, maybe I was like 13 and 14. I recognized that in them at that age. I was like, if I let this kid just sulk all the time, he's not gonna grow up to be a sore loser. He's gonna grow up not to understand what life is like. So even through that, I would be like, okay, you've lost, but why did you lose? And okay, why did you feel bad about losing? You know, and they'll be like, oh, because I did it. I'm like, yeah, but okay, move that away. What is it about losing? It's like, maybe you're embarrassed about losing. Okay, get rid of that. If you get rid of the embarrassment about losing, all you're doing is just learning, and then you start to enjoy the game. So it's like that aspect of that where, like you were saying, is so important too, because that is life. Like, that's why I thought it was such a fascinating evolutionary trait that we've kind of developed, because these things, even I didn't realize, I was teaching them about life. I was teaching myself too, but I was teaching them about how to accept losses and like fears when you have difficulties and like all these things that come across. How do you look at these things? And if you look at them with like this like kind of like attitude of, oh, I can't believe this thing's in front of me, well, you never have the chance to grow. You never had the chance to actually look at it for what it is, which is an opportunity for you to grow. And yeah, it was fascinating for me too, as I got older and older, to see how they've developed as people now too, as kids. Because I talk to them like how I talk to you guys. Because I've always had that kind of, I like that kind of like ability. It was sometimes we go over their head. We're talking about Piaget.
Talking about Piaget, but I remember you were telling me in Africa, it's like kids are just adults but small. They're just small. It's not adults and kids, it's just small person
and big
person.
Literally, like, and it's even more pronounced in Africa, because like when I went back, you see them, because obviously it's not like they're here, we've got everyone goes to school. If you don't go to school, the government come to your house. There is the opposite. Like, no one cares if you go to school. You have to pay to go to school. So like most times the parents will have their kids working with them, and you see the kids just walking around as the parents is in mid traffic trying to sell food to this guy in the van. And it's like, really, you see the kids grow up very quickly because they're around adults. And even though like maybe it's a sad story because they didn't really have that kind of childhood, you know, maybe they have it within themselves, but these kids are really just small people, small adults, and they're just like, you know, they'll talk to you like they'll talk to you like they're your age, because they're so used to having that kind of development. And I think on both sides of it is interesting too, because one point they do see life very early on, and I think I had that weirdly, because even I don't remember, I came in when I was 6, so obviously when I was back home, I was doing the same thing, walking around with my mom while she was selling stuff and stuff like that. So I just a vivid memory I have of that, of just being like on her back while she's selling stuff. And even though that's like kind of like gone from my kind of, you know, consciousness, I still have that lived experience, you know. And yeah, no, it's just fascinating to see that. It's fascinating to see how that pulls over to here, and seeing like how even my little brother and little sister, even though they're not in that environment, we still kind of teach them that same kind of routine.
Do you think in like that African, I'm only saying Africa a lot because obviously that is the only experience you have, and so like, well, not the only one, but as in terms of childhood, we've sort of spoken about games being a tool to teach those lessons. Do you think, I know it's video games specifically, and you said you grew up playing football. Do you think they can still learn those lessons of being a sore loser, or putting that aside and that quote-unquote humiliation to accept the game and accept the challenge? Like, are they still learning those lessons without video games, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is physical sports enough? Do they do it well enough, I guess?
I mean, it's difficult for me to say, to be fair. I think my brother and my sister at this age, well, my brother's a big gamer, so he still plays games with his friends, and I think the aspect of what I see is that he's now found a community, I guess. He's found a group of friends who love video games and they'll clown each other like how we did, and he was shouting at them, would be like, it's less about the, you know, evolutionary thing, more about like, you're an idiot, why did you do this? And that's part of it too, you know, he's learning.
Sure.
I heard that is crazy. But it's like, you know, and my sister's less gaming now, you know, she's kind of learning, funnily enough, you know, she's taken after my mother in just different ways, you know, cooking and all that stuff, because that's just how it is. And I think so it is fascinating to see the development of these things. Even for me, speaking for myself, I don't know when I stopped learning, because I feel like at some point I stopped learning those skills and those traits, and I started like adopting more British ways of development, you know, more developing think about my emotion, you know, like, and I know
Thinking about your emotions.
Thinking about my emotions. Yeah, I know.
British thing for you.
Yeah, to me, because back home that's not a thing. Like that's very much, and I know we spoke about this. Like the idea that recently I've been learning to actually feel my emotions and like feel through them and like understand them. And maybe that's not a British thing per se, but it's very much
whether your experience of it was.
Yeah,
it's anti-African.
It's anti-African for me because growing up, it was almost bottle your emotion. It's almost like you live for the community. So whatever emotions that you have, you should be able to have that subservient to what the needs of the community is. And because we were not in that environment anymore, we're in this environment now. I'm having to wake up and look around and be like, actually, I have to think about myself because actually this all comes from me. If I'm not feeling, even myself how I'm supposed to, or not understanding how I feel, like, being able to place feelings and emotions and descriptive of, okay, this feeling is this feeling is that, kind of like pushing through the emotional Overton window almost, to have these emotions I can actually think about, that was a new process for me, and like I'm still learning about that.
I'm gonna try to very roughly link this, but I think what I love going back to video games, I think what I love about video games is those kind of life situations, at least on a fundamental level, like the core emotion of those, like the fear, the adrenaline, the anxiety. I feel games do a really good job at conveying those things. Not to say I could learn your upbringing through a game, but maybe, who knows. But the reason I wanted to go back to gaming is because I asked you about what you think is more important between narrative and gameplay. Thank you. And for me, I'm a bit of a purist in this sense, because for me, even when we're talking about things like learning lessons and chess just being like this pure game, there's no story to it. You make the story, and that comes from a solid foundation of gameplay. And so I've always believed, and I always will believe, that unless you nail the gameplay, and there's this thing like a loop, what is the gameplay loop? What is the thing you do to get a favorable outcome? And then that will drive you to do the loop. And that's the loop, right? And that's what a game needs to have for me.
Why?
So because that's just what, if I want to watch a film, if I want a story through and through, I'll watch a film. And also I know that those stories are probably better told anyway through film. However, I do agree that, through that kind of immersive experience of a game, and I'm not talking about VR or nothing, just literally being in this world, like you were saying before, that definitely does lend itself better to tell a story and make you feel really immersed in it, for sure. But at the same time, when I play a game, I just want a game. I want to be in a situation where there are mechanics baked in that if I want to do this thing, this needs to be done. When I get this thing, that happen, and then I need this thing. I need to do this to make it. Then I do it, and then that goes on to the next thing. And maybe that's not a loop per se, but those kind of mechanics are what I like, and what make a game for me. And I think playing games in my youth, I mean like core games, those are the kind of lessons I've learned, I suppose. And going back to perseverance, but also even things like critical thinking to a degree, it's like even something like driving. I don't get scared when I drive. I'm a big man. No, I don't get scared when I drive. Of course I get anxious sometimes, but it's been drilled in me to almost like, in those physical situations where I need to be aware and I need to move and I need awareness, I just feel through the games that I've played as a child, I've just kind of developed that. And that's probably a hand-eye coordination thing, and maybe not necessarily talking about like that loop I was talking about. But for me to get through the game and maybe learn those wider lessons of perseverance, I need a good loop to be there. And I've always said that.
I've got a question on that too. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're heading in this direction, which I really, really am interested in. I think that first thought that came to me when you said that was about how applicable those kind of skills that you've learned from gaming are to real life. And you mentioned driving, and I think that's so important. But also like that's about emotional intelligence and emotional kind of controlling your emotion. I think we're kind of like talking about that topic, and I want to ask a question on that. So it's like, so how do you think, kind of not stepping away from gaming, but building on top of that, how do you think those kind of the traits have helped you
on like figuring out how to handle struggle, figuring out how to, you know, like emotionally deal with these challenges that, you know, kind of, as we've said, games are like kind of evolutionary traits and like kind of map the world for us and all these things we develop on. But how has that helped you and for you?
You know, I think off the bat, I just want to say it's not like I play games and I don't feel stress. Excuse me. It's not like I play games and I don't feel stress ever, or I don't know. You know, I'm absolutely not saying that I'm perfect because I played games, but what I think games have kind of drilled into me, probably on a subconscious level, is a specific attitude that kind of just helps me to just move on with things, you know. Not that that can't be learned in other ways, but like I'm absolutely not saying you can only learn it through games, but personally, it's just baked in an attitude into me of that perseverance, which I even learned through my dissertation as well, of just continuously going through, always looking for another angle, always seeing if there is another way to do something and not giving up, I suppose. And I think, you know, when we talk about media that we've consumed, even things like anime, you know, it has kind of given me positive outlook on life, I want to say, or hopeful, I suppose. Hopeful that I'll always be able to retry and do the level again.
Be the king of the pirates.
Be the king of the pirates eventually. But yeah, you know, I feel those kind of attributes have lent, those attributes that I've learned almost through things I've consumed and things I've engaged with. Yeah, like definitely that kind of frustration and honestly it's a detriment sometimes because there can be situations where the right option is to give up, and I don't mean give up like throw your dreams away. I mean like this is a dead end, find another route. And maybe it's my own you could probably argue that a game should actually tell you literally that, you know, but I think the way I've played, which is interesting in itself, you know, even if that wasn't the intended experience, the way I've played is like I won't use additional items sometimes, or very rarely I do, or I won't swap my powers and abilities around. I just get obsessed and I just keep hitting my head on this wall until I do it my way, you know. And honestly, I think that's an unhealthy thing, you know. I don't think it's all positive and healthy sometimes, and I definitely think you can learn those kind of things. I do believe there is an element of like addiction to it, and we talk about perseverance, but maybe it doesn't necessarily make you persevere in something you actually don't give a shit about. And if anything, it's probably more like I would rather be doing this thing instead, which just makes me procrastinate. Oh my god, which just makes me procrastinate even more.
Is your phone okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably
it dropped from.
Yeah, okay, cool.
How high did it go?
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
No, I didn't, but I just saw it boom.
Yeah, my god, how heavy is it? I lost my trail of thought, but yeah.
No, but basically you were talking about just like kind of like running into that wall, because that obviously those skills and those things help you, but
yeah, sometimes it's a detriment, you know, for sure. I'm definitely not saying like it's all sunshine and rainbows or anything, but yeah.
Okay, here's a question then. Has because to be honest, you know, I think like where I am currently in my life is that, like I've said about finding this kind of like middle ground of emotions, and it's like it's a lot of things about learning how to develop on that. You know, obviously like the first initial stage is like, cool, you learn how to figure out your emotions, but also how do you develop, how do you move on, what's the second order effect of these things, you know, like letting go of stuff, you know, mastering attachment, all these things. And you know, for me, you were speaking about how you learn your kind of that development through gaming. For me, I learned it through like romantic comedies and like poetry and all these novels and literature, which shows you how to gain something, how to have that kind of connection to people, but not really the other side of it, you know. And so like it is a very new thing for me to have to learn traits and personality traits where it's like actually there is boundaries, and like having all these things and recognizing that within yourself, and like, you know, when you come against struggle, how do you face that? Because for me, similar to what you're saying, it's always like head on, like what is struggle, you know, I whatever, like I'll just power through, you know. But there is certain parts of life, and that comes in maturity, understanding how to really like maneuver through that, you know. So kind of the question I have for you. What to prioritize, exactly, yeah. So question I have for you is that what advice or what things have you learned from either anime or manga about, like, you know, figuring out, even gaming, about figuring out how to maybe go the other way, you know, maybe that is the dead end, actually, to figure out how to let go and, you know, move through that.
Like, I think I'm saying this as someone who has, you know, has had, not that I'm special for this, but has had regrets, probably didn't always follow a dream, let's say, in the right way and stuff, you know, so I'm definitely not giving this advice as someone who's necessarily succeeded at life. But I think it's always good, and this might sound a bit cliche, but it's always good to put things in a very clear perspective of what you're capable of. And that doesn't mean like how talented you are, that doesn't mean you know, thinking like, oh, I should have done this, you know, and I just was too lazy. No, I mean, like, what's your support system? Like, do you have family behind you? Do you have family behind you with money and you don't need to worry about them too much? Do you have aging family? Do you have siblings beneath you that you need to worry about? Can this be prioritized? If it can be prioritized, is it sustainable, you know? And I think if you get to a point where you realize, like, man, maybe I could have persevered more, but if I want to achieve this thing and maybe it didn't work out, have perspective of perhaps why it didn't. And that doesn't mean make excuses, but I think it means make your peace with it and move on to something else, because I feel that making peace bit doesn't happen for a lot of people, myself included. And I think it can take a long time, and maybe by the time you do make peace, it could be too late and you don't go on to that next thing, which maybe is even more beneficial to you and something that you even prefer more, but you don't see that in the moment because you're just thinking, this happened and I couldn't achieve it, I suck, I'm shit, you know, and you sink into that hole. Maybe not as direct as that, but
I know
in
exactly
a sense.
what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So definitely, like, just put things in a realistic perspective, and I think talk to yourself how you would speak to someone else. Like, you know, I told you about a bad situation earlier, and it was like, I could have been super hard on myself and tell myself, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. But, you know, you say to me kindly, like, don't worry, next time it'll be different, this is fine, whatever. But when we talk to ourselves,
so different, right?
So different, man, so different. And I'm trying to learn that, and I think that's my advice. You know, it's like, put things in a fair perspective and give yourself graces that you would afford to others, that you just don't to yourself for some reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like, especially for someone like me, and I think I'm a recovering people pleaser, because I've just always learned to, like, you know, engage with people and everything's fine and everything's great, but there's with that, right, is that conversation you have with yourself about when things don't go as you expect, you know, because you always have that kind of level of scrutiny for yourself. I think that's kind of like, it's fascinating you think about these traits, right, because on one hand, that is a positive trait, to always be sometimes always hard on yourself, or even sometimes always open to people, right? But to what extreme, and to what extent do you do that, and in what in situation and in what environment? Because you feel like if that's in every environment and everything, then that's obviously something that can be taken to, you know, it becomes a vice instead of a virtue, you know, and like figuring those two out, you know. And I think that these are funny things, because I always thought once I got to a certain age and I figured out these emotions, because I did that, went through the struggle, figuring out these, like, actually, like, placing it, setting boundaries for myself, you know, thinking about the people around me, bringing new people around me, having that kind of openness to actually have that relationship with them, you know. You feel like you've learned the skill, you've learned the trait. But life is a flat circle. We always come back to that same things again. We just test us all the time about how much we've actually grown, how much we've actually learned, you know. And I think that for someone like me, like I've kind of been saying, you know, that people pleaser element is like figuring out as I get older what that means for each iteration of me. You know, me at 25 years old is very different to me at 21 years old. Me at 21 years old, people pleasing, was very different to me at 25. You know, it's like, what have I learned in those 4 years, and how can I apply that to now? Do you kind of relate to that? Or
I do relate to it, and I think as someone who is also a perpetual people pleaser, I've definitely put myself in, let's say, unfavorable positions.
for others,
But I think, I don't even think there's anything necessarily too wrong with that at times. Like, I think there is a balance for sure. And I think for me, what I've kind of tried to focus on is that I can be a people pleaser, but I can also be like, that's not what I mean, but I guess that as well, maybe. But jokes aside, like, you can be a people pleaser, but you can also ensure that you have your own best interests at heart, for real. And you know what? Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you do just like being a people pleaser, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Obviously, if it's done in a healthy way. But if you do like to be a people pleaser, you can't effectively please people if you're not okay, you know? And so I think it's always got to be this cost, like, benefit analysis you need to do, where it's like, look, I'm not okay right now. I'm putting up a barrier, and the barrier isn't to keep you out. Well, I guess it is a little bit.
Keep me in.
Well, it's not like it shouldn't be focused on them. It's focused on just yourself, and like, I just need space for a minute to recalibrate.
It's king putting up their walls because they've been attacked by all these 4 nations. That is a kingdom joke you will not get unless you read the manga, so go read the manga. But okay, cool. One of the things I wanted to talk about too, jumping ahead a little bit then, was to have a little bit of a shift, but also I wanted to talk about comedy and like just different aspects of the things that we also share, we also like. I think that an aspect of our relationship that I really appreciate is that we kind of have the same kind of humor, and even though we don't have the exact same kind of humor, it's very much a lot of crossover, which I really appreciate. But one of the things is that I wanted to ask you is that what form of comedy do you enjoy the most? You know, there's different forms. There's memes, there's stand-up, there's just different, you know. But as you know, as you get older and as you kind of your taste kind of change, what are you drawn to still?
So, growing up, you know, when I was very young, I loved Friends. So sitcoms, you know, I loved Friends. Sitcoms were very available on Disney Channel. You literally had like That's So Raven, Sweet Life on Deck. I guess Hannah Montana to a degree, but all these literally sitcoms, like live audience sitcoms, obviously canned laughter, whatever, but that was the setup. And I think my sense of humor was very like situational punchline thing, which is like those sitcoms, especially the Disney ones, because that's what I was watching a lot when I was younger. But then as I got older, I did start to watch stand-up, but I wouldn't say that's really something that changed my sense of humor. But maybe thinking about it, actually, I think that made me do more character work, I guess, if you want to call it that, where you're impersonating. Sometimes you're like, it's an item, an object. And my mum does this a lot as well. It's like, we'll give the fridge a personality, you know, and be like it's upset that it's empty. That's a shit example, but we'll impersonate an empty fridge, or if, you know, those kind of things, or like we'll make, I can't remember what it was with my cat, but it was something along the lines of like, we were respecting him too much, like he was a member of the house, and it was just kind of, just dumb, like we're going to come in one day and he's reading a newspaper, he's got glasses on, like that kind of thing, and we just build it into this absurdist image. I do love that kind of comedy a lot. I also love, like two other things I want to say. I also love irony and talking about something in a way that's just not genuine, but intentionally, because that is the joke. You know, the joke is to say this thing that's so ridiculous, not necessarily offensive. Maybe when I was younger it was that, but now it's like just saying something that would be otherwise so obvious that it shouldn't be this way.
It's very hard to explain. Right?
Yeah,
it's an
sure.
intangible thing that happens in a moment.
Sure, I love that. And then I also love just people watching and just seeing those micro moments that I just think are so hilarious. And it's especially when you know how someone thinks, and you know, maybe we're thinking about the same person, but just knowing how someone thinks and seeing them in a moment, and you're just like, of course that's what you would do, you know. Even my dad does the same thing, and I think Courtney is like learning that. So now when I visit my dad, I have this experience where we both know what my dad is like. He'll do something insane and we just look at each other and it's like, man, this is gold, you know. This is so hilarious, and characters, and yeah, for sure. I think that's the kind of comedy I love. And I think how those last two present themselves, it's like, I do love Twitter at the moment, because there's a certain snarkiness, lack of care on it. You do get a lot of dickheads who maybe care a bit too much, but often not. The people that I've managed to follow and the little bubbles I've curated, it is just people like everyone knows we love dumb shit, and it's kind of just laughing about dumb shit. And yeah, I think I do love that. That's the kind of irony thing.
That's brilliant, man. That's brilliant. I think for me to speak for myself also, like, it's funny because like growing up, funnily enough, I was like drawn to like stand up, and like I never really watched like not stand up sitcoms. Yeah, I never really watched sitcoms. I saw Friends. My sister loved Friends, so I was like on the house all the time. But because I saw it so much times, I didn't really like pay attention to it. Right. But now I kind of went back and watched it, and I was like, it's a bit funny. It was pretty good.
I understand that there's a lot of like, especially with sitcoms and Friends in general, it's like a cheesy American comedy, and very much like, well, what's going on here? Like I get it, but I kind of grew up with it, so I can't help but love it. But that being said, I haven't watched a sitcom in a long time,
really?
And even not just a live audience one like Friends, like just a comedy show. I love stand-up as well, and I think I love it as a form of art. I don't necessarily, like, if I go to watch stand-up, I don't actually laugh that much. Odd occasions where I've watched a special and I'm like, oh, that is hilarious, and I'll laugh out loud. But typically I'm more just like, I love following the people speaking and hearing how they connect things. I most enjoy sitcoms when I can see they're enjoying it. And like maybe they'll break character a little bit and laugh at their own joke. Not when it's too excessive, but when that becomes part of the story.
Enjoyment of it too, like
the
fact that it's funny and it's like it's smart.
For sure, and like their perspective of the world, and it puts things in perspective for me. And like if they notice this situation is so stupid, and I love that. I love that kind of stand up. I was gonna say though, you know what I do actually quite love, and it's a bit weird. It's that Netflix I Think You Should Leave show. I don't know if I showed you it, but it's like just so absurdist, and it's like a bunch of writers get in a room, and it's like, that awkward moment where everyone's talking about an online video that you haven't seen, but you're embarrassed to let people know, so you kind of just pretend you know it. And it will take a situation like that and just build this sketch out of it that's so absurd and ridiculous. And it feels so real almost in a stupid way, even though it's of course like the furthest thing from reality. But as almost like what do you call it? Not ADHD that people just throw around these days, but it's like an intrusive thought. It's like the sketches are literally just intrusive thoughts that I know I would have, but building a sketch from that. And I honestly recommend it. It's a bit, well, if you like that kind of absurdist stuff, but I love it so much.
You've spoken about it, and I think I've seen like one clip of it where he's like at this like it's like a dating show, and he's like having the best time ever, like alone by himself, and then he has to get kicked off, and he's just like, I don't want to leave, I love it so much. And he's like, you've never even spoke to me. And it's like that kind of, I think we have the same kind of humor when it comes to that, like absurdist. Like, cause I can see, and I think I want to talk about why, like, we find that, not why we find it funny, but what humor and having that kind of perspective about humor says about a person. Because, like, I can see the writer's mind when they do that. I can see that they also, like, looking at the world in the same way, the ridiculousness of it. Like, they don't take the world too seriously, almost, or they can find pockets of joy and happiness. And I really love doing that. Like, honestly, like, most of the time, I'm out here, I'm trying to make myself laugh. Like, I would do stuff just to make myself laugh. And I think it's funny because I think that not something I don't think about it too deeply in the moment, but like when I can look back on myself, I think it's just like, oh, like if I find enjoyment in this thing, I can bring other people in and make like, look, this thing is also funny, and it's like that's why I've kind of grown up. I found that kind of angle into humor, so even moving away from the stand-ups and the sitcoms and the humor that's produced, even humor that I enjoy, and what that says about me is just like, oh, I'm just in the moment just trying to have fun. If I see something that I think is funny, or if I notice something that, I don't know if anyone else knows, I maybe look at you and be like, did you see that? Did you see how funny that was?
And then I always have, exactly. And that's what I sort of mean, like when I mentioned, seeing a situation with people, because sometimes, honestly, sometimes life is just so funny, like, and you just can't write it sometimes, it's like, it's impossible to really capture what happened, but because of all the setup that we've inadvertently done, and then there's just a moment that's such a glorious payoff, and it's like, man, life, yeah.
Life is beautiful. Life is beautiful.
Life is beautiful sometimes.
Life is so beautiful. Life is beautiful. Okay.
Maybe that's
that's a great place to end, because we do know we're both thinking about the same thing, which is the fact that the phone is going to turn off. But no, I think this has been
Short, but I think it's been amazing. I think thank you so much for doing this. As I like to end these episodes, I always give the guests a chance to ask a question, which you've actually asked quite a few. But I always give them a chance to ask a question, anything they've been thinking about recently, they don't want to ask me. Is there anything that pops to mind?
Are you upset that everyone is saying Joker 2 is terrible?
See, I know we've been talking about this, because I've had two kind of... First, I was like, okay, yeah, it's terrible. I'm not even going to pay attention to it. And then I've had people coming up to me, people that I know. So you've obviously told me about Roy King, but also a girl that I knew. She was like, oh my God, it's brilliant. And I'm like... And I had my friend watching. He was like, oh, it's terrible. I'm like, there's no way both of you having such an extreme reaction. Like, usually it was, okay, whatever, go watch it. But I feel like the online hype is stoking people to pick a side.
Yeah, there's this kind of opinion at the moment where it's like Joker made a sequel to go against the fans of the first film. And look, I haven't seen it. Maybe it is a dumpster fire. I don't know. But I kind of also enjoy watching bad films for what they are. And I know that kind of speaks to me in a way, and maybe, like I should curate the content I watch more, carefully, whatever. I don't care about that really. But I just find it so interesting that, like you said, something can be... To be fair, I've only seen terrible things. But, like, I quite like Lady Gaga. Like, I loved her in A Star Is Born. I love musicals. I'm not crazy about Joker. I think he's a bit too overused in this day and age. But whatever, I like Joker. Joaquin Phoenix's performance in the first one was amazing. I've not watched Taxi Driver, and everyone was saying, Joker's just Taxi Driver. So, for at least until I watched Taxi Driver... It was an experience that I hadn't really had before, let's say. And I just don't know how it can be that bad.
Did Roy Keane's opinion change?
You know what? It didn't, because I think I know the kind of person Roy Keane is when it comes to films and media in general. But it did put a thing in my head where I was like, man, like, so what is this show? Like, why does Roy Keane like this?
Like, why does everyone hate it? That was like, to me, that was like the biggest thing. Why does everyone hate it? But we will watch it, hopefully not in 9 months. Review it, because, I feel like it's going to be amazing. But yeah, bro, thank you so much for doing this, as always. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for watching. We got to the end, and until next time, peace.